morning, everyone, and welcome to Room 42. I'm Liz Fraley from Single Sourcing Solutions. I'm your moderator. This is Janice Summers from TC Camp. She's our interviewer. And welcome to Dr. Xiaoli Li, today's guest in Room 42. Xiao Li is an associate professor of professional and technical writing at the University of Dayton in Ohio. She teaches technical writing, business writing, writing for the web, usability, and user experience. She's fascinating in that during the winter intersessions of 2019 and 2020, she took students in her professional and technical writing class in global contexts class to China and visited 3 universities and 10 companies. They met with 50 technical writers and conversed with 30 Chinese college students. She coordinates and conducted 3 writing teaching workshops in China in the summers of 2016, 17, and 2018. She received an MA in Scientific and Technical Communication from Bowling Green State University and a PhD in Rhetorics, Communication, and Information Design from Clemson University. Her research interests include technical communication in global contexts, technical writing pedagogy, and program development, and collaboration between academia and industry. She regularly presents at technical and professional writing conferences, and she's currently on sabbatical leave, and we're grateful that she could interrupt her time to be here with us. She works with the China Technical Communication Alliance to promote the proposed technical writing certification program in China. And today, she's here to help us start answering the question, how can writing professionals build bridges? Welcome.
Thank you, Liz.
I'm excited you're here.
Thank you, Janice.
Yes.
Thank you, Liz.
Yes, Dr. Li, it's a privilege to have you here. So you've got some really interesting publications out there and some other articles that I want to go and read about later about entrepreneurs, women, gender roles, and some cultural facets too. But today, I'd like to talk to you about your book. Now, you have a book. Is it published or it's up and coming to be soon to be published?
The textbook is called Becoming a Technical Writer, which was published last October in China, and it's by Fudan University Press. Fudan University is one of the top universities in Shanghai.
Right. Now, is that available in the States as well, or?
No, I don't think so at this time.
Okay.
And
at this time,
because of COVID, and even I haven't seen a copy. I don't have a hard copy of this book yet. And then, well, in next month, one of the students is going to bring a few copies to the U.S.
Oh, good.
To me. So I'm going to use that in my tech writing class in the fall semester.
Oh, nice. Well, they'll get the privilege of that. So talk to us about this book. It's very interesting, the journey of this book and its origin. Like, what inspired you to take on this project, to write this book?
Okay. First of all, I want to admit that this is not a single authored book. It's truly a collaboration between the university professors of technical writing, translation professors, and also practitioners of technical writers in China. And one of our co-authors, she's also the leading author, is Monica Xie, and she has experience working for IBM, Microsoft, and then another U.S. company, a small tech writing company in Shanghai. And then currently she's teaching. She's doing lots of the technical writing class, teaching tech writing classes at Fudan University, Southeast University, a number of universities in Shanghai and also in Suzhou. And so for this book, from Liz's introduction is that she mentioned that my graduate degree was in scientific and technical communication from Bowling Green. And so after I got my master's, I went back to China because before I came to the US for the first time, I was already an instructor in the university and a foreign language university in Xi'an.
Oh, okay.
And so they kept my teaching position. And so I was basically on a 2-year leave. And then I went back to my university, and then the department chair was very generous. And then when I talked about what I'm studying, and then she agreed to allow me to teach technical writing to the students, juniors in the English department at Xi'an Foreign Language University. So I did that for 1 year.
Mhm.
And that year, because it was technical writing was a new subject for
Yeah,
students,
right.
for everyone, and I
Yeah.
didn't have a textbook. And at that time, the textbook I was familiar with when I was a graduate student here in the U.S. was that the Mike Markel's book,
Uh-huh.
Mike's book, and so Markel's textbook, and I can't remember which version of that. And so I have some copies, and then I used some materials from that textbook, and it was
Mhm.
interesting. There was some more like the students. It was harder to use the book because quite a number of things at that time, like almost 20 years ago, is that was so different. And the students, lots of the students didn't really need to write a resume or in the in-class exercises. And so when there was
Right.
talking about write a proposal about the parking lot or something, those are the things that didn't apply to my students. And then not many people
Right.
drive at 20
Yeah.
years ago in the university.
Right.
And so parking was not an issue at all. And
So it's interesting. Context had a huge impact.
right. And
Yeah.
so we thought that, in the last 5 years, and so 5 years ago, I had assignment is to write an article on the technical translation with Dr. Huiling Ding from North Carolina State University. And
Mhm.
so we have to do the research and we have to interview lots of the technical translators in China. And during
Mhm.
that interview process, we're talking with people, when I was introducing myself, saying we teach technical writing here, and then one of them, and Professor Cui from the from the university in Beijing, and he's an expert on localization. And he said,
Uh-huh.
we do have a small community in China of technical writers. And so he introduced me to the community, the technical
Right.
community in China. So since then, I've been working with hundreds of the technical writers on a daily basis by using WeChat and as a main contact tool, the channel to communicate with each other. And so
Right.
always I get the latest news and about what's going on. And then people always ask questions in the group chat. And then now we found in the last 3 or 4 years, and then some universities begin to offer a tech writing class. But the challenge has been is that, there isn't such a major in China, so we don't have trained professors, instructors to teach the course, right? And
Right.
then the second thing is that not every university may find a practicing technical writer to walk into the classroom and teach a class. And so
Right.
still a very limited number of the universities are offering tech writing class. The second main challenge is that there's no textbook available for the Chinese students.
Right.
And so a number of us get together, we just thought we need to write a textbook that's for the Chinese students, especially the students in the master's program of translation and interpretation in China, because that's a growing field of study in China. There are over 200 universities that are offering a master's in translation and interpretation. And so we decided to write a textbook for them because those are the people who are very likely to get technical translation job. And some of them would change to a technical writer in China.
Right.
So that's an audience group we
Right.
found. And then we decided to write the textbook in English because it's the very common practice these days even in lots of not only just the IBM, Microsoft, they have the office in China. And then people have to write in English, but also the Chinese companies are also creating the source text in English.
In English, yes.
And because it's much easier to translate from the source text in English to any other multiple languages than just translate from Chinese to many other languages. And so it's a cheaper process and a more effective, efficient process. And so we decided to write it in English. We decided to write for the MTI
For the
students. And
Mhm.
also is that we want the textbook to more reflect the current tech writing practices in China.
Right.
And so that's the book.
Well, and also to reflect the context of coming from China and writing English, right? So that they understand, like you pointed out, I mean, some of the simple things that you just don't think about, like the exercises, they need to be relevant
Right.
for the
Yeah.
population. Yeah.
That's true.
Which would make a huge impact for people's comprehension, because you don't have to explain the concept of a parking lot. You can use
Yeah.
examples that relate directly to the community.
And so the book was published last October. So far as I know, a number of schools, the school in Beijing, Shanghai, and Xi'an, and then they have already adopted this book as their textbook when they teach the tech writing class. And so it's being used, the textbook now is being used in Chinese universities and to those students, mostly to the MTI students.
Right. So now, and to author, sorry, go ahead. You're going to say something.
No, I was trying to say is that so almost it's a still technical writing is not a it's only an elective course for some of the universities who do offer a class, and that's why it's just well, there's not a system or a collection or cluster of tech writing classes. This might be the only class for most of the universities. This might be the only class the students will be taken, and before they are getting a job in trying to consider a job in technical writing. Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Interesting.
And the context examples, that's not the only way your book is different, right?
Right. And I think that I'm familiar with textbooks used here in the US, and they went through like the 10 different textbooks. And most of the tech writing textbooks are designed not really for the majors in professional and technical writing. And it's more like a very good textbook for the service learning courses, and service learning courses in technical writing for engineers, for business students. And so in this case is that, well, most of the textbooks are written by professors in the US, or there are also a number of the textbooks and are written by practitioners, but then that's totally different from the other textbooks, and two different kinds of the textbooks here and are being used in the US. But so the topics covered in the textbook, in the US textbooks, most of them would cover similar things like the basics about technical writing, and they move on to the different types of the documents in we create instructions, proposals, reports, resume, and then our textbook was not organized in that way. And instead, and we do have 5 modules or 5 chapters, 5 sections. And so it's about, we followed the documentation, production, creation process. And so we do have a planning section, we have the developing section, we have the reviewing section, and then we have the final, the delivering section. And so, especially when it comes to the developing part, and we're trying to reflect the current practice. And when people, lots of the bigger companies are using the structured authoring, and then some traditional company are still doing the like the simplified like the technical English, STE. And so, and also is that a lot, especially when we do the professional writing, we talk about the plain language. And so those are all the content we included as one chapter or one major section in the in one let's say module of the book, and under developing. So and so those are some of the differences of our textbook from the textbooks used here in the US.
Right.
Yeah, that's a huge addition, because I don't know that how many programs even here have a structured authoring as a major or even like a minor module in the degree program. And that's a hard thing to learn and teach once you're in a practicing position.
Right. And well, if it's tech writing program, if they have a department, they have a 4-year program, or it's a master level program, and then it could be one of the courses. And I do know a number of the schools, like the Virginia Tech, they may have, or the Texas Tech, they may have a course on structured authoring.
Right.
And then, but not every school could afford that kind of the people to teach that, or is that, well, they have the student population. For example, at University of Dayton, we don't have such a huge group of the students who are focusing on the technical writing, and so it's not covered. We focus more on the business writing because that's a required course for our students here.
So now you went around. You traveled to author this book, right? And you did. What was the process that you went through? And your collaborative team, right? This isn't just you. Like you said, you work with a team, which is, I think, working with others makes things a lot stronger. So tell us about that process.
The collaboration is that this happened last summer. Well, the process was for a number of year and two, but last summer we really focused on the producing the text, developing the text. The planning stage was longer. That started 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And
okay. Because I was going to say, wait, last summer to now, that's fast.
No. Last summer was more like last spring we started already the reviewing process. And for example, in my technical editing class, and I asked my graduate students to read some chapters of the book, and then just ask a way to see, well, this was kind of like to understand kind of like the textbook or the text written by the non-native speakers of English and in English. And so it said, well, if it's an English reader, and then what kind of things? It's more like we apply the editing process and then to examine a text, but then this time is focused on the text written by the L2 learners. Okay, so that was, but then there are 5 of us, and then 3 of us are in China, in the Shanghai area, and then 2 of us are in the US, and then Professor Zhou is at Metropolitan State University. And so we used email, WeChat, and phone calls to stay connected. And then we also used the shared tools, and then different. We tried quite a number of the software or the tools available for the collaborative writing, because Professor Zhou and I can use the Google Docs, but the other people cannot use the Google Docs, and so we have to use a tool in China, but sometimes we don't have the very easy access. And so it's always someone is doing this kind of forwarding the document, and that had been created, and then to us, and then for the review, and then so we just we do have like all the chapters, all the sections, and then each person is responsible for one, but then the other 2 will be reviewers. It's like the peer review, and then for that section, and then we have a schedule a Zoom meeting. We discuss, and then what need to be taken away, and how we're. So several rounds of those kind of the review sessions, and then editing and the discussion sessions, and then so that was mostly how we collaborated. It was not that easy, and definitely it's different from like single authoring.
Oh yeah.
Always
it takes a lot more time, a lot more patience, and waiting, because you also have huge time differences.
Right, 12 hours or 13 hours time difference. Yeah.
So now you often will take students traveling around with you.
Yeah, I've been here. I've been at the University of Dayton for 9 years, and I've been pretty lucky, and so almost every summer, and I had the opportunity to teach abroad we have the study abroad programs. And so I've
Right.
taken students to Europe. And then when there was 1 year in London and Dublin, there was twice I've taken students to Germany and Austria and the Czech
Uh-huh.
Republic. And so for
Uh-huh.
the summer, 6 weeks, faculty-led study programs. And those
Uh-huh.
are mostly business school students, and they are taking,
Right.
they typically, those students would take one business class and then one business writing class. And
Right.
then in the last 2 winter breaks, I had the opportunity to take the students to China. Those are what during the winter intersessions. And so I teach the professional and technical writing class in global context. And so the class is
Right.
divided into 2 parts. In the fall semester, we met 5 times, and then to go
Mhm.
through the basic concepts and about
Uh-huh.
localization, translation, and user experience. And then during the 10 days, 2 weeks during the winter break, right after Christmas, and then we would travel to China. And then that's a very intensive program. So we travel from one city to another, like from Beijing to Suzhou to Shanghai to Hangzhou, or from Beijing to Shenzhen to Hangzhou to Shanghai, and coming back to the US. And so we visit different companies.
That is an action-packed. That is
That
a
is.
dense
Yeah,
travel.
so
Yeah.
that was not only good for students' professional development and to learn more about technical
Yeah.
writing, and then they're
Mhm.
taking the class for credit hours. And also it was
Mhm.
quite a cultural experience for the students when we travel
Mhm.
in China, because they have to, they tried all kinds of things. And then in terms like visited different sites and try different
Mhm.
food, traveled by train, used they cannot use their US phones, and so they have to figure
Right.
out how to, we have to stay connected of the group, because there are 17 students traveled with me the first time, and it's a big
Mhm.
group. And so
That is a big group. Yeah.
Yeah, and also is
But
that
when you're talking about localization,
Mhm.
I mean, what a better eye opener than to actually go and experience. I like the fact that you put them through experiencing the culture, not just talking to people, but experiencing it. Right? You mentioned food, which what does food have to do with technical writing? Well, it's part of a culture is the food that we eat and all of that colorful experience, that immersion into it.
Mhm. Very, very interesting. Like we don't know, when we first came to the US, we have no idea what fortune cookies are, and then
Yeah, they were invented in LA.
and then for my students is that when we traveled to China, they were surprised to see that how Pizza Hut operates in China, McDonald's, how
Mm.
McDonald's
Yeah.
operate in China. And so
Yeah.
Pizza Hut in some places is like a fancy 5-star hotel, that kind of the restaurant, and that kind
Uh-huh.
of the level, sit down, and then you can order different things. And then the Chinese, some of them, the menu also changed, and they
Yes, it
have a
has to.
localized version of their
Yeah.
menu, and that fits that particular customer group. And so
Yes.
that's one of my students said that I heard a lot about localization, but once I got to China and listened to the lectures, and finally got to know what that is. And so I
Yes.
just thought that was
And it's funny that you bring up like a large chain.
Yeah.
Like if you
Yeah.
and it's interesting because any country that you go to where a large chain has come from, like predominantly America, and they go into another country and they have to adapt to the culture there. And it is interesting how they do change things. So you go to different countries and it's not always the same, and the perception of it is not always the same. And that feeds right back into technical communication. When we're trying to write technical content, it crosses borders and boundaries. It's global. Whether you realize it or not, what you're writing could
Right.
be read by somebody in any country on the planet, right?
That's true.
And there's the things that we need to consider in context.
Yeah.
And what a great example for them to experience with you.
Mhm.
You know, somebody wrote those menus. Somebody was thinking about the user experience in the context. Like, there is a technical writer in that chain somewhere.
Yeah. So the business writers get to start to understand and appreciate what technical writing is about. Because I think even in the States, I think we still have to answer that question for a lot of people. What are technical writers?
Right. And
Yeah.
also interesting was that when we 2 years when we visited Alibaba,
Mhm.
there were two technical writers. They were not non-Chinese. They were from Great Britain. One is from Great Britain. The other one was from the U.S. And so
Mhm.
the students talked with them, and so we had a few hours with them, and then they were talking about working as a technical writer in China. And so more is from a non-Chinese perspective and how they fit in the Chinese company, because Alibaba is a complete Chinese company, and
Right.
then how they fit there, how they collaborate with people, what a work day looked like. And
Right.
so it's different from talking with other technical writers working for the US companies, or technical writers, Chinese technical writers who are Chinese who are currently working for the Chinese companies, right? You may have
It
different
all gets kind of
expectations.
confusing.
Yeah, different
Yes.
expectations and different experiences.
Yes.
And so that was, for some, that was just, they learned quite a bit. It's not just
Yeah.
what I'm telling them, but they learn from other sources.
Yes. And it's interesting how that Alibaba, for example, knew that they
Yeah.
needed technical writers.
They have a huge team. And then the document, one of the documentation teams is headed now by someone who started working as a tech. He has a degree in computer science, and then he started as a technical writer at Microsoft like 20 years ago, and he led the Microsoft documentation team for quite a number of years. And it's about, I think that 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and then he started the team at Alibaba.
Neat.
And so I would say that, yeah, Microsoft, IBM, and these big US companies did train lots of the technical writers on the job. So they hired the people who were English majors in college, or who were computer science majors. And then they started their first job as a technical writer, and with the guidance of other experienced technical writers in the US. And then they moved right in. And then even today, like for IBM, we visited them, and IBM in Shanghai. And so when they have the internship positions for the students, and it's several, at least 3 months or 6 months internship opportunity for students. And then once they get the full-time position, and then those people would come to the US. I think it's Austin or the Dallas area in Texas, somewhere in Texas. And then they would go through a 6 weeks training, very specialized training on the design thinking. And so that's different practices.
Yeah, we had Jason in room 42.
And and Emma Rose
talking about
too.
Design thinking. I think you know Jason. Yeah.
Jason, I taught in China one summer, and so it's at Guangzhou University of Foreign Language and Foreign Trade. And then the 5 of us, Theron Howard and Jason, me, and then Kurt, and also the Sam Draga. The 5 of us taught 5 different classes in one summer to the MTI students in the School of Translation at Guangzhou, Guangdong University of Foreign Studies.
Oh, interesting.
2019. Yeah, 2019 we were there.
Yeah. What a fun collaboration. Yeah. Small world.
Yeah. So I organized that program. It's kind of like a small program. And well, we expected to go back then fall 2020, but then nothing happened last year. So
as it happens.
yes. We haven't done anything yet. Mm-hmm.
Maybe next year.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope we can do that. Yeah, so, COVID changed so many things. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you've got
that's true.
Students on their way here though this next year.
Yes, and we have had the exchange program with one of the universities in China, is a Shanghai Normal University, and but those students are in mechanical engineering technology, or in the electrical engineering, electrical and computer engineering. Okay. They are coming to the U.S. for their last year to complete the capstone projects, and so it's a collaboration between the two engineering schools. And then we do have the tech writing classes for them. And so we do offer a tech writing class to this group of the students in the fall semester. And in the summer, and we teach a class is more reading and writing in American universities, and which is a course I'm teaching right now.
And you found something interesting happening because the students are coming here and they're learning communication. They stay. Like it's been a huge thing for the university.
Surprisingly, we thought that we have this kind of the 3+1 program, and then the students are here just for 1 year, and they come here to finish their capstone project. And then as it turned out that 80% of them would stay in the US to pursue our master's degree or a PhD, and either at University of Dayton, or they would go apply to some other programs in the US. So, but that's like huge. 50 or 60 of them would stay, percent of them would stay at University of Dayton for a master's degree, which for the university was really a good thing.
Absolutely.
And these are people you're teaching writing to who come from engineering, so it's not their core focus. That's interesting.
No, technical writing is not their.
Not their main focus.
No.
But it helps them, right, to understand how to communicate. So they may be in a company as an engineer that has technical writing team, but having that foundational knowledge, I imagine, helps improve the experience for the technical writers that they'll be working with.
Right, and that's the idea. And also is that their engineering professors would always talk about technical writing skills, technical writing, a number of ways, and then how you're going to talk with experts, and then how you're going to, especially sometimes you do have to give a presentation or the proposal to the non-technical audience, and then it's different ways and how you're going to find out what kind of the background information your non-technical audience know, and what kind of information they might need. And so that kind of the rhetorical analysis of the context or the purpose, as well as the audience, is also very important for them. And so tech writing classes, and also in the summer class, and they do receive training in those areas.
And are you finding are you finding better relationships, interest, more connection between the engineers and the technical writers since they've had these experiences? With professional writers in their organizations and in their future, like, are you seeing the engineers sort of understand and appreciate or grow relationships? Are you seeing any of them want to be tech writers?
Have you converted anyone?
Almost. I have to say almost. And was that 2 years ago? 2 years ago, one group, there were 8 students from Shanghai Normal, and two of them came to me and talked with me quite a number of the times, and then thinking is that, well, I have a background in engineering, and then what about doing the technical writing, and so that when I go back to China, I can find a job as a technical writer. And so
Right.
compared with other students, and then they kind of have the advantage because they have taken the tech writing classes. And also
Yeah.
in my particular class, and then I asked them to interview some of the tech writers in China to learn about their job and then their background and how they became a technical writer. And so that helped them. And then I guess those are the kind of like the reasons they were considering becoming to study technical writing. And then they didn't because there wasn't any kind of the funding or opportunities in our tech writing program. And so they have decided to go with engineering management instead of technical writing.
Interesting. It opening up a whole new career path for people who didn't like that's a battle we fight everywhere. Like a lot of people don't realize this is a it's interesting. One of the things I wanted to get back to.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that might be an interesting research project to do in the future, is follow these people who've been through the program, engineers, they go on to be engineers, and see, as their career progresses, how that informed or shaped their career as an engineer, because they appreciate things from a technical writing perspective. I just think that would be an interesting research.
Yeah. I do have a student in the tech writing class, and I taught him in 2014. And recently he got promoted, and I saw that on the LinkedIn. And then a few days later, I got a message from LinkedIn message from him, and he was talking about he works for he works for GE, and he's an engineer. And then he was saying that, well, engineers do write a lot, and then you do have to apply those kind of the technical writing skills on the daily for the daily writing practice. So I just thought,
well, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, because like you said, you're going to have to present your ideas, or even if you're an engineer, you're going to have to present, right? And you're going to have to present technical information to people who might not be so technically savvy.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
That's true.
Well, and you've got to document what you did and why you did it. That institutional knowledge has to be stored somewhere outside of your own head.
Sure.
Right. So I wanted to get back to one more question. We're running out of time, but I wanted to get to one more thing. Did you say earlier that you used your book in the editing class? Like the students were part of the were reviewers and editors?
Yes. So that was before, that was last spring, spring semester, right before, while we're still developing the text. And so it's just not the entire book, but only sections of the book.
Parts of it.
We had parts of it. And then we had the Zoom meeting with all the authors, and then with the students. And then they kind of learned the entire background and the context, why we're doing what we're trying to achieve. And then they went through the text and then provided comments.
That's a great way to get it's a great way to get good, practical, real experience too.
And to see it from all the points of view, like to really see what it looks like from all the different that's amazing. You should do that again. That's just
write another book.
Something else.
Get another collaboration for another book.
So to see that kind of the collaboration at that kind of the level. And so as a writer, with writers and with editors, and with the editors of different levels and from different backgrounds as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and all the way through the process, writing non-native written English, right? Like, and seeing it through, that's amazing.
It's like a tongue tire, but it's fascinating from my perspective. It's very fascinating that you're writing a textbook in technical writing in China, in English, for Chinese writers that are going to write in English.
Right.
It's just,
that's
like,
exactly.
Wow. And, when you think about it, it's like a mind twister. But then when you think about, you settle in, you think about, like you pointed out from the very beginning, context is everything.
Mhm.
And if you're trying to write a textbook to teach a population, how much more impactful it is if you write it from the perspective of the context of the learners, right?
Mhm. Right.
So, in technical writing, we're writing for our learners, right? That's
Right.
our audience, our learners.
Yeah.
We're trying to tell them how to use their smartphone, but they're learners. So everyone to us is a learner. So I
Yeah.
just
So
find that
that's
fascinating.
yeah. So that's what we said in the preface of the book. Is that we used the user-centered approach, and then we do is that trying to go through the process. It's more like we have the persona, we have the very specified audience, because audience analysis is so important in technical writing.
Yes.
Right. And
yes.
we always
yes.
come to that same audience group that we're writing, speaking to them directly.
Yeah, it really, it makes the whole definition of localization, it really takes on a new meaning, a new depth.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just translating words into another language.
Mm-hmm.
It's context, user.
Transcreation.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing with us.
Yes.
It's
been such a delight talking to you. And I can't wait for a follow-up, because it's going to be used in classes this fall, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we'll have to have a follow-up with you to find out how's it going.
Well, the thing is that my students, they're not the target users of this book.
Right.
But then I want to, it's really from the other angle to look at the perspective, to look at this book. And,
yes. Well, you're in touch with all of the students who are using it.
Right.
It was written for them. Yeah. So you're still in touch with them.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Lots of the books.
And yet, I wonder about, as soon as it's ready in the US.
Yeah, I know. That's why I asked right away.
I would like it, right? That's the thing.
I want a copy.
I may not be the target audience, but I can always learn things, even from the contexts that are not aimed at me. And in fact, sometimes we learn more.
And that's a good point that you bring up, because I joke with Liz a lot about, Liz, you're not the target audience.
For so many things.
Give a perspective on something. I'm like, okay, clear, you're not the target. But even though we're not the target, I think it would be fascinating and interesting.
You learn from that.
To study that textbook. Yeah, we learn. Even if we're not the target, we'll learn.
Well, you learn about your context.
Yes.
Right. Yes. And also, as Confucius said, when the three are together, we always can learn something from each other.
Exactly. Right. This is very true. Very true.
And a perfect way to end.
Yes. It has been such a delight talking to you, Dr. Lee. And I really do hope to have you back again.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. Really enjoyed the room 42.